Well, hi everybody, Dr. David Perlmutter here, and I got caught by a clock that was slow. Who knew? So we're here, and we're going to wait for Dr. Mark Hyman to join us. Wonder how everybody's doing. Hi, Kate. Great. What can I tell you? All good. So we are going to talk to Dr. Hyman about what his views are on fasting. For all of us, we are now involving ourselves in time-restricted eating. The plan was 18 hours of fasting, 6 hours of eating, which means that you may be getting ready, depending on what time you have your dinner, maybe getting ready to have to break your fast at this point. So I'm going to wait to see how if Dr. Hyman comes to see me. Let's just see. I'm going to push that button and hope for the best. Go live with. Let's see. Requests. Seeing a bunch of requests. And I'm going to try to figure out. I've always had an issue with this. Anyway, not going to do that for now. So let's see. We'll wait for Mark to join me. He just texted. Good. And that's great. So we're moving into the time-restricted eating part. And I am posting quite a bit. Lots of blogs about the benefits of time-restricted eating. It's certainly one heck of a lot easier. I don't know how all of you guys were feeling yesterday, late afternoon, early evening, but it is, if you've never fasted, it's certainly a bit of a challenge. And so, you'll get through it. The more you do it, the better it will be. And certainly you'll realize what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Some people say they're going to have coffee or tea, and that's totally up to you, and that might make it much easier for you. Other people cut back on their exercise, for example, during the time that they're involved in fasting, and find that works. So let's see, who's that? Nope, that's not Mark. I will try to figure out, somebody can talk to me about how to do this. I think go live with, and I should see Mark's name there, and I'm not seeing it yet. Anyway, so let me scroll through the several hundred of you that are already there, and maybe I can just search for Mark's name. Boy, that would be interesting. Let's see. Hang on, everybody. Nope, not there. So let me close that and go back to being live. Now, again, the level of activity. I thought we had a very interesting question on the first day was, what if I feel lightheaded when I'm fasting? And I think my answer to many of you was probably surprising. If you feel lightheaded and weak, eat. You shouldn't feel like you're going to pass out. That's a pretty powerful signal. So you eat. Or, some people can be okay with a little bit of that, and that's all right. You really have to get to know your body. And that's another thing about this whole fasting thing and time-restricted eating. You really get to know a lot about yourself, how well you do without food for 24 hours. Think about our ancestors. They might go many days without having access to calories. And so we have these mechanisms within us that are actually activated when we are not getting calories. And these are survival mechanisms that we are now activating. We're activating those gene pathways so that we can survive this period of nutrient depletion. So let me see. People are talking about when they're going to have their breakfast. And I want to just talk about the meaning of that term. Some people say, well, I never have breakfast. But I would tell you that
he's on Instagram. I'm talking to Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Here.
Hang on, everybody. Hey, David Perlmutter MD is where it is, I think. We're on Instagram, yeah. That's me. Hang on, everybody. Well, it's probably David Perlmutter, and so I would sign, if it has my face, there you go. All right. Call me back. All right, bye-bye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, isn't life wonderful? I exercise a lot, and I get weak if I don't eat. Okay, so that gets back to I don't have breakfast till 11 or 12. Some people say that they don't have breakfast. And I would tell you that everybody has breakfast. Ultimately, everybody breaks their fast ultimately, right? That's what break fast means. Let me search for Mark one more time. He had some difficulty in finding me. There he is. Let's go and give him a request. Wow, technology. Hadn't worked yet, but good. We're waiting for Dr. Mark. When technology works, it's pretty wonderful. And these days, how great that we have all these incredible ways to connect. So waiting for Mark to join. How wonderful that he called on my wife's phone, or maybe she called him. I don't know how that happened. But anyhow, somebody's saying that love this is so authentic. It is what it is, right? And we are, a lot of questions about exercise. Should you exercise when you're fasting? Again, you got to get to know what you're comfortable with. Once you keto adapt, in other words, once your body is really finding it more, it's more easily using fat as a fuel and less reliant upon first the blood sugar that you have, and secondarily the glycogen that you store in your muscles and liver, and you're able to mobilize fat relatively easily, and that's something that your body has to learn, then fasting is so much easier. Okay, here we go. Let's just see what that says. Connect. Okay. La-di-da. No, that was a comment. So waiting for Dr. Hyman. Let me see if I can. No, I've already a message. Anybody has any great ideas, let me know. Let's see. There we are. Request. Dr. Mark Hyman. Add. Waiting for Dr. Hyman. It sounds like the name of a book. Waiting for the Godot. Anyway, Mark, what do you know?
Success.
Too much.
All right.
Way too much.
Fantastic.
Well, you look like you're hard at work here on this glorious day. So,
well, I'm in my office upstairs in my man cave, getting ready to do a podcast, talk to Jose Andreas from World Central Kitchen about feeding the hungry in this crazy time where we have too much food.
We're going to talk about
too many hungry
fasting. I
people.
think we will, but you really have taken on kind of a new mission, and this is sort of the global experience in terms of food. And we were talking actually, Austin and I just yesterday about how the Western diet, which is now becoming the global diet, changes immune responsivity, and in terms of what we've been writing about, changes how we make decisions. But even in the context of COVID, can you just do a little relationship between the diets that people are eating and their risk for bad outcome?
Yeah, we're seeing, unlike some other flu, like the 1918 pandemic flu, which killed a lot of young people who are relatively healthy, this is killing people who are sick, who have a chronic illness, which basically most of the time means they're pre-inflamed. David, you've taught me so much about inflammation and chronic disease. Whatever your disease is, it's an inflammation disease if it's chronic. Heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, obesity, pretty much autoimmune diseases, allergies, gut issues, they're all inflammatory problems, and they're rampant, and they affect 6 out of 10 Americans. And on top of that, 88% of us are metabolically unhealthy. That means that 12% of Americans are metabolically healthy, which is terrifying. It used to be about 3% were obese, and now it's about 42%. When I was born, it was about 3 to 5%. And that has led to this condition of being pre-inflamed. And so when COVID hits, what it does is it activates your body's own immune system to attack. The problem is it's an overreaction. We call that a cytokine storm. And that's really what's driving so much of the problem. It's not the virus itself. It's the virus landing in a fertile ground of a pre-inflamed human that has been eating a diet that's an inflammatory diet, which you and I have written about for years. And it's the diet of starch and sugar and processed food that activates all these inflammatory pathways and develops that belly fat, which is actually not just there holding up your pants, as our friend Sid Baker said. It's actually a dynamic, live organ producing hormones and neurotransmitters, and most importantly, inflammatory cytokines. So it's literally like a fire in your belly. And if you can stop that, you are going to make yourself more COVID resistant and more resilient in the face of getting it. And when you get it, less likely to get sick.
Well, our good friend, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, just published a report, I guess, end of last week, talking about the convergence of these two epidemics.
Yeah, pandemic within a pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, these two pandemics. One is this pandemic of chronic disease that is, global, as you've well characterized in your new book, and this obvious pandemic that we're all talking about. And you know, people are saying, gee, it seems to be so random who's going to have a bad outcome. We know that elderly, we know that people with chronic diseases, but surprisingly, when the pandemic approached America in a significant way, we began seeing a lot younger age group end up in the hospital. Yeah. And the question was, gee, these are people who are young and healthy. And the challenge is to explain to people, well, the young in America, they're young, but they may not necessarily be healthy. I mean, our rates of diabetes in young people, rates of overweight and obesity are very, very high compared to other nations. And this correlation is really quite clear. So, you know, though it's hard to swallow, there is a lot of personal behavior setting the stage for a bad outcome. In other words, choices that people make.
I mean, it's at some level a personal choice, but I do think that we live in a very toxic food environment where making the right choice is a hard choice.
Absolutely.
And making the wrong choice is the easy choice. And there are certain communities where you see that even more prevalent. For example, the African-American, Latino communities are ravaged by this disease. 3-fold higher rates of death and infection, sometimes 5 times higher rates of infection. I mean, in Chicago and Louisiana, 30% of the population is African-American and 70% of the COVID deaths. And the reason is that it's not just the food. Obviously, there's the overcrowding in housing. There's lack of access to be able to work at home. People are considered essential workers who are brown and black and have to go and brave commuting and working in close quarters and working in all kinds of bad situations. But they also don't have access to food that is nourishing and whole and real food, and it's driving this predisposition to chronic disease. So I think we have this sort of perfect storm that's affecting our most vulnerable populations. And I think you also mentioned, aging. Aging is a risk factor. Why is aging a risk factor? Well, aging is a disease of inflammation if you really look at the biology of aging as we see it now. And what I always say is what we see as aging in America is really abnormal aging. And last night I watched a documentary. It was really great. It was with Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, Norman Lear, and there were all these guys were in their 90s, and they were all hanging out with all their 90-plus-year-old friends talking. And Dick Van Dyke was on there. He was 90 years old. He was married to someone 40 years younger than him. He was dancing up a storm. He was more limber than most 30-year-olds, and full of life and vibrancy. And he basically has exercised and moved his whole life as a way of staying young and fit. So, and eating well. I think so. We have the potential to not be subject to this problem of inflammation if we know what we're doing. And that's sort of what we want to talk about today. What are the steps we can do to actually help improve our metabolic health through fasting, right?
Well, let me you just threw a term out that I want all of our viewers to hear and understand. Let's take the term inflammaging apart just a little bit. It's a combination of inflammation and how that relates to aging. And it's certainly, we see as we age, higher levels of inflammatory markers. We know that those markers correlate with diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, and even coronary artery disease. Mm-hmm. So it really locks us into this notion that the aging process is associated with increased inflammation. But I think what you're about to tell us, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are some very important steps that we can do predominantly related to the food we eat and how we eat that can actually slow the process or even reverse the process.
Absolutely. What's so fascinating, David, is that you and I have been in this game for a long time. And, we long ago clued in the fact that sugar and starch and processed food and refined fats were the enemy. And we've always told people to eat less of them. But what we really found out is that the same mechanisms that they initiate in the body around reversing insulin resistance and prediabetes and inflammation can be actually magnified by not only focusing on what you're eating, but when you're eating it. And the body, it turns out, and this is what's so exciting to me in the realm of functional medicine, is that we long believe that the body has this innate ability to heal and repair and function at a high level to create resilience. Jeff Plant calls it organ reserve or metabolic resilience. And yet it's not something we learn about in medical school. How do you create metabolic resilience? How do you actually create better reserve of all your functioning? And it turns out that there's these biological mechanisms that are built into our biology that we can activate that literally can reverse all the ravages of aging. And they do it by regulating mitochondrial genes like FOXO and DAF2 and sirtuins and mTOR, all these various pathways that are kind of a big mumbo jumbo of medical terms, but essentially they're like switching stations that switch on healing, repair, regeneration, cleaning up, we call autophagy. It's basically really like house cleaning. And it's this amazing process that we now understand how to activate. And it can be activated in many, many ways. So just by eating a clean diet and getting off the starch and sugar, like we talked about, that helps. But the timing makes a big difference, and also the quality of what you're eating. There's a lot of terms thrown around: intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, fasting, longer periods of fasting, fasting mimicking diets, ketogenic diets. They all do the same thing. And here's what they do. They turn off inflammation. They turn on your antioxidant systems. They increase the number and function of your mitochondria. They help autophagy, which cleans up all the waste products in your cells and recycles things, sort of like a recycling plant in your cells. It builds bone density. It enhances your cognitive function. It increases your mood. It helps to build muscle, reduce belly fat. And it does all these things effortlessly using your body's own built-in biological regeneration repair mechanisms. So it's such an easy hack to do, to turn on all these switches, which work effortlessly simply by doing them, by focusing on what you eat. Now, even if you eat a crappy diet, if you just restrict your eating window to 8 hours a day, it works. Now, it doesn't work as well if you eat a better diet, but it works. If you do just 10 hours, that's okay, or 12 hours. I mean, 12 hours, what should we do, right? We should be eating dinner, like we eat dinner at 6. If I eat breakfast at 8 the next morning, that's a 14-hour fast, right?
That means you're not getting up in the middle of the night and eating.
What?
I want to, it's often been said that the best defense is a good offense. As it relates to COVID, there is no offense. In other words, we really don't have a good, aggressive way of attacking this virus and ridding our bodies, et cetera. So we really have to focus on the defense. And I would like all of our viewers right now to, while Dr. Hyman is speaking, think about what he's saying in the context of defense, in the context of amplifying how your immune system works, how it deals with this challenge, how you regulate inflammation, which really, Mark, as you talked about a while ago, that's really the cornerstone that really sends people into a spiral, as it were. It's this overabundance of these inflammatory mediators called cytokines that really, so far, from a pharmaceutical perspective, have been very difficult to control. There is some indication that steroids, dexamethasone, may be helpful, but not very. So let's talk about defense. So what should we be doing in terms of timing?
Yeah, but people don't realize that this isn't a long-term project. That if you focus on these strategies, that even if you're very overweight, you really can quickly change your metabolic health. Even if you're still have a ton of extra fat on your body, you can change what that fat's doing by what you're eating. So we see that with bariatric patients, who are 400 pounds, they get a gastric bypass, 2 weeks their diabetes is gone. All their blood levels are normal. Their cholesterol is normal. Why? It's not because they lost all the weight. It's because they changed what they ate. And I think that's the message here, is it happens very quickly. So you don't have to take a long time to do this. And I think the strategy is essentially, I would say, are really simple for people who want to prevent COVID from ravaging their bodies if they get it. Obviously, you do all the precautionary measures, but is really eating a very low glycemic, a la grain brain diet, a la, whatever I've written, Buck's diet. It's all the same,
Food
right?
Fix.
Food
fix, everyone.
Food, what the heck should I eat? And
eat fat,
eating,
get thin.
More good quality fats, and getting rid of all processed food, and eating a lot of plant-rich foods, colorful fruits and vegetables, which have a lot of phytochemicals that are anti-inflammatory, a lot of fruits and vegetables. You talk about the microbiome in COVID. I mean, prebiotic foods, probiotic foods, these all help to regulate. I'm like on a full microbiome enhancing program, on a full anti-inflammatory diet, although I do intersperse it with some tequila, but only very good tequila occasionally. and then of course you focus on the timing. So I've been really focused on eating early. So I eat about 5 o'clock, and I don't eat really till the next morning, maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. And I find that really great. And I eat this sort of a narrow window, and I feel much better. I don't go to bed on a full stomach, because that's a bad thing to do. Because if you time restrict and you, let's say, eat from like noon to 8 and you go to bed at 9, that's not so great, because you're going to bed with a full stomach. So you want to make sure you give yourself 3 hours before bed.
Satya Khanda and others have really called attention to the fact that when you sleep, that's what you should be doing, not digesting. And, I think that what you're telling the viewers is really, these are simple tools. It's not even, yes, it's what you eat, but when you eat as well, that is so fundamental. I mean, it's part of this whole notion of chronobiology, where we're trying to reconnect with our genetic expression in terms of how it has responded to the rising sun, the setting sun, for as long as we've been on the planet.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think we can use these simple strategies and not only improve our own health right now, but what I see really scary, David, is in the news is an increasing amount of weight gain. People are calling the COVID-19, and people are at home.
Freshman 15, now the COVID-19.
Yeah, COVID-19, and people are using comfort foods. I mean, my best friend was like that. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is not okay. Like, and so I put him on a program. He lost a bunch of weight. He felt great. So I think even though it's easy to dip into emotional eating and stress eating and comfort eating, I think this is more important than ever to double down on your health, both in terms of the quality of your nutrition and nutritional density of your food, and the timing of your food eating, and also the nutritional supplements that I think can make a big difference that I've written about. I wrote a blog where I talk about what are the foods we should be eating, what should be not eating, what are the supplements we should eat. You can go drhyman.com/C19 for COVID, C19 drhyman.com/C19. You'll find the blog. And I go through a lot of what we can do to protect ourselves and make yourselves more COVID resistant.
Interestingly, so many of us who have been doing this for such a long time, we've kind of ended up in the same place in terms of what we're talking about from what we should eat perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much that sugar and refined carbs are the bandits here, that fat happens to be your friend if it's the right kind of fat, that we need lots of dietary fiber, and pretty much the plate should be colorful vegetables. If you choose to have an animal source of protein, yeah, but not a whole heck of a lot. That's basically what we're saying.
It is. It's pretty, it's true. I mean,
coming to that place. Let me get a little personal with you right now, and I don't mind doing it for myself. How's it going with respect to the changes in your life now with the changes in the world?
Oh, well, like everybody, I've had to sort of retool and rethink what's going on. But, it's actually, I'm very adaptable, and I haven't been home this much in 25 years. Slept in the same bed.
Every time I call you, you're home.
I know, I'm home. It's like working out. I really taken this time to sort of focus on, what can I contribute? Because I'm really blessed in this situation, and I, doing a lot of podcasts and education and webinars and writing, and I feel like, how can I be of service is really what's top of mind for me, and also how can I use this time to just also, heal myself, because I realized that I've spent like the better part of my adult life running around serving the world, doing a lot of traveling and teaching and working really, really hard. And I think I put a lot of miles on, so I kind of feel like I'm in the repair shop now.
Yeah,
it feels okay for a minute, and it'll be over, and I'll go back out. And I'm working now on trying to work on the food system issues and trying to deal with this sort of bringing to awareness this chronic disease pandemic that we have that's within this COVID pandemic, and working on doing some town halls with congressmen and various scientists to talk about these issues and policy change we have to make. So I'm working on the policy front and doing my bit.
I'll say that I've had a couple of moments that were a little bit challenging for me. Like yourself, I'm always up doing this, that, and the other, and I think it's fair to say that everyone's going to be hit with this in terms of the emotionality of it all. I don't mean getting the virus, just the changes in terms of what our lives are like. But I like what you said about, it happens, there's a change, and you double down on your efforts to do what you do best. And that is basically to save the world.
I mean, basically my heart is aching for what's happening in the world, because it just seems so unnecessary right now. Like there's just so much unnecessary suffering. And in America, we've done such a crappy job of dealing with the virus. Other countries have done much better. And I think, we really, are just the most, while we're an extraordinary country, we're also the country, and this was reported on the New York Times a few days ago, that has the greatest disparities across every dynamic of society, whether it's health or life expectancy or the economic disparities, opportunity disparities. I mean, just the educational disparities are just so vast in this country, where we have so much wealth and so much resource, and it just hurts me to see that we're in this state of divisiveness and chaos and breakdown. But sometimes they say before you get a breakthrough, you have to have a breakdown. So
yeah, it's always darkest before the dawn. and hopeful for that. But it's one thing to have hope, and there's another to have strategy, and make some plans. As you know, I'm up in Canada right now, and it's a different experience up here. I have to tell you, we're in a 14-day isolation, lockdown, quarantine, if you will, and it's very strict and very stringent, and we have to do what we are told, and as such, compare the numbers. So,
Yeah, I mean, I talked to my friend Alberto in Chile. He says there's martial law down there.
Yeah.
In New Zealand, there's mandatory quarantine. You get locked in a hotel for 14 days.
The local people.
All right,
Just
hang
all
on.
the
We're
people
going to take a
from
break here.
Huntsville.
This is local South.
Sweetheart, please.
Oh, that looks so nice.
So
When do you
that's
bring-
from all the local organic growers in Huntsville
Oh,
that have
geez.
been supplying us, coming out and bringing us this extraordinary food.
Oh, my
It's
God.
just
That looks so good. I grew up in those neighborhoods.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, I know.
So, Mark,
Great to see you.
let's see if there are any burning questions that anybody has. Go ahead and post them now, and we're going to participate in Dr. Hyman's wisdom and see if there's anything. Just a lot of great comments. My goodness, we have a bunch of people that are joining us, as you know, from around the world. Just really a lot of positive comments. There's been a couple of questions passed through on autophagy. So I wonder if you can break that down just a little bit and explain what that is and why it's important and how we can enhance it.
Yeah, so autophagy essentially means eating yourself. It's like little Pac-Man. I think about it as our body's recycling plant. So our proteins, our various molecules, everything's going to get produced in our cells, and it has to get recycled and cleaned up and renewed. And it's so imagine if you just eat all the time. It's like you never let the garbage man come and collect the garbage, and it only happens when you're fasting or when you're on a ketogenic diet, which means you're mimicking fasting, or when you're on a prolonged break from eating. And it's such an essential fact of life. There's such a great book, and Sid Baker. Sid Baker was on this so long ago. I remember, like, oh God, maybe 15 years ago, he told me about the book called "Ending the First Cause of Death." You know that book? Ending the First Cause of Death. And it's all about this. It's all about mitochondria and autophagy and how you activate the cellular process that's built in. And so essentially it's where you're basically cells clean up all the waste and garbage and then recycle the parts and then build up new parts. So you basically get to renew yourself all the time. And if you don't do it, you will degrade and age and decline. And if you do it, you will live a long, healthy, vibrant life. And it's sort of how it works. And it's pretty simple. And activating it, like I said, can be simply just not eating for 12 hours a day, or 14 or 16, depending on what you want to do. It can be taking a day, a week of fast. It can be doing 5 days of low-calorie diet. It can be doing 24-hour fast. It can be doing more prolonged fast. And then it can even be doing ketogenic diets for a period of time, cycling in and out. So all that can be tools that you can use, whatever your preference is, whatever you feel good on, to actually help you activate this natural process that your body uses to clean up the garbage and build new parts.
Let me digress just a little bit, because I recently attended an anti-aging, actually it was X Prize for anti-aging. And more than half of the researchers in the room were taking a medication called metformin, which many of our viewers have heard of. It's used primarily for diabetes. And there is some evidence that metformin also enhances the process. It's basically getting back to the kind of the Western way, just pop a pill. Any concerns about that?
Yeah. I mean,
thank you. Right answer.
I mean, it's all about the magnitude of effect, right? If you look at this one study called the Diabetes Prevention Trial, the DPP, which was a study done many years ago with a diet that you and I would think would be terrible, but it was better than the processed food. It was just pretty low fat, high carb diet. But they compared that to metformin, and they tried to see, what was better in preventing diabetes in a pre-diabetic population. And it was 58% better using lifestyle than metformin in preventing diabetes. So will metformin work a little? Yeah. But is the magnitude effect that significant when you compare it to what you eat? No. And does it come with side effects? Yes. Do we know the long-term consequences? Not necessarily. And I think I use that medication in diabetics in certain situations. I'm not against it. I just think taking it as a preventive aging pill is a dumbass idea when we have all these other strategies like exercise and diet and sleep regulation and microbiome enhancement. I mean, there's so many other ways to regulate your metabolic health. I mean, you've written a lot about it in your book about the microbiome, Brainmaker, that the microbiome plays such a role in your metabolic health, not just in your gut health, but in your overall resistance to weight gain and your cardiac health and your risk for diabetes. All of it is contained in your gut. So I'm much more focused on those strategies, which, listen, if it worked, David, I would say, sure. Like, I'd be writing prescriptions all day. I have no problem with it. I just think, it's like, why use a milligram of aspirin when you can use 1,000 milligrams in terms of the potency for a food, right?
Right. The other thing about that study was really interesting is the mortality rate in the metformin group was twice as high as the lifestyle modification. So
Right.
something to think about. And I tried to have that conversation with these really brilliant researchers who were drinking, can I say Coke? Yes, drinking Cokes as it were. And, they're intervening at one small point of this big pathway at the AMP kinase part that interfaces with mTOR, et cetera. But realizing that dietary change is so multifaceted in terms of its input. And what an interesting discussion today, not just about what we eat, which you've talked so much about, but when we eat. We're seeing a lot of publications about that these days.
I mean, it's also interesting, David, we mentioned like the multifaceted ways in which food works. Drugs usually work on one pathway, like you said, the AMP kinase pathway that does one effect, but then it can have other side effects. There are 25,000 molecules in plant kingdom food, most of which we really haven't properly characterized, all of which have dozens and sometimes hundreds of biological effects. So you do the math on that. You're talking about millions of different pathways being regulated in a positive way by eating the right foods. No drug can compete with that. Yeah. I mean, I always say I'm agnostic. If there's a drug that's going to work better than eating broccoli, well, great. But there isn't. So.
Well, the problem is that our decision making is affected by the foods we eat. The more refined carbohydrates, the higher processed foods, actually through what you talked about earlier, inflammation, change our decision making, lock us into making more impulsive decisions, which then makes us more impulsive in terms of our food choices. And beyond that, exercise, whether we're going to get a good night's sleep or not. So it really becomes a self-serving, feed-forward cycle where we are locked in. And, unfortunately, that's what's happening globally. And it is difficult, I think, for some people to break out of that. And, one of the tools that we use that I think is really effective is this 24-hour fast, for example. Whoa, what a wake-up call for a lot of people to be slapped in the face with not having food, self-imposed, for 24 hours. I really think it's, it amplifies your sense of gratitude, but I think it also gives you a sense of that you're finally regaining control. Who's running the ship?
Yeah, our close friend, Patrick Hanaway, talked about his cancer treatment recently on a functional medicine conference lecture, and he talked about how he used a ketogenic diet during his treatment and fasting as a way to enhance the effective chemotherapy and reduce the side effects, and how extraordinarily well he did, unlike any other patient. And I think, I recently had back surgery, and I did a 41-hour fast before and after in order to activate my body's own healing systems. And it was, I actually really liked it.
So Dr. Hanaway has been very, very public about his story with cancer and the dietary things and the mainstream treatments as well. We got him connected with a fellow down at University of South Florida in Tampa, Dr. Dominic D'Agostino. And he's done so much research on ketogenics, some research on how it relates to cancer, but really more so the mechanics of how to do it, how to measure your beta-hydroxybutyrate. And so anybody want to see that podcast we did with Dr. D'Agostino, really interesting stuff. So, there's a lot being done in the world of cancer, as you well know. But what about the technicalities? I think we've kind of changed our conversation a little bit towards ketogenic. When you fast, you do tend to get into ketosis. So there's a perfect segue there. Why not? I mean, it's one of the many reasons that fasting is so powerful. But how much involvement do you think should people get with at least learning about a ketogenic diet for the treatment of various medical problems?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you're a neurologist, David, and I think you probably were aware of a ketogenic diet long before most of us, because it's the way we treat epilepsy when drugs don't work.
Well, it's long before. It was 1928, so I wasn't around.
Really? I thought you were 117. You're looking good. Okay, so I think it's increasingly being studied in all sorts of things, from cancer by really legitimate scientists like Siddhartha Mukherjee, to Alzheimer's, to autism, to obviously diabetes, cardiovascular disease. So many problems that can be amenable to it. I don't think it's an easy thing to do long term. I think it's a very therapeutic diet, and I think we're still learning about, you know, is it good to be on it long term? Should you cycle in and out of it? You know, historically we used to cycle in and out of it, right? I mean, we have a bear in our backyard, and he's like, we put out the bird seed, and he's, you know, comes every night. We got a bear-proof bird feeder, and it's like solid, you know, cast iron. And he couldn't get into it, but he literally picked it up, turned it upside down, emptied out, and just ate all the bird seed. And, you know, he's eating as much as he can all summer, but then winter comes, and he ain't eating all winter. Problem with us, we just keep eating all winter. So we used to have periods of abundance and scarcity. So I think he probably cycled in and out a lot of ketosis for years. So I think we still need to learn more about it, but not a bad strategy.
Well, you know, you just brought up an interesting point, and that is the bear and what the bears do in the summertime. They try to gain weight so they can hibernate all winter, and they use their body fat. And, you know, it gets back to this notion of the thrifty gene, the idea that we really want to store fat whenever we can. And by eating carbohydrates and sugar, it tells us that winter's coming, we better store fat. You know, in the day, it was really survival of the fattest, not survival of the fittest. And, you know, that's why we like sugar as much as we do, because we're programmed to like it. But, you know, once in a while, we need to bring the adult in the room and make better decisions, even as it relates to the food we eat. The problem is, as you in Food Fix made so clear, that we are absolutely day and night bombarded by the other messaging. Eat whatever in the heck you want. These foods are good for you. And if you get sick, by golly, we've got a pill for that. So that's what people buy into, and it's so unrealistic. And getting back to COVID, I mean, it was this case in point. We got, you know, there's no treatment that has any merit.
I think so, yeah. I think it's still a message for everybody listening is just don't eat for 12 hours a day. Eat dinner, wait till breakfast till you eat. I mean, eat early, don't eat too early in the morning. Pretty easy to do. And I think that's a simple step that people can do. If they want to go more, they can go more.
All right, Mark, a couple of questions here.
I actually have to go. I have a podcast with Jose Andreas I got to do, who's awesome. The founder of World Central Kitchen, who's actually doing incredible work feeding hundreds of thousands of people all over the place who are hungry and where disasters happen. He's kind of one of my heroes. So hopefully you guys check that out. And check it out on my Dr. Pharmacy podcast coming up.
All right, we'll work on this Instagram, put up these links, and get everybody directed to it. So I love you, man. I'm glad you're safe.
You too.
And doing well.
I'm sorry I'm not coming for lunch. That salad looks so good.
Oh, Lee sends her love as well.
Okay.
All right, we'll talk soon, everybody. Bye for now.